My daughter came up to me this week and asked me a question. She's of the age of asking a lot of questions. She's questioning everything, and it's good. And she came to me this week and she asked me a good question during this time of year. She asked, "Dadda, is Santa Claus real?" You all know and have heard of who Santa Claus is. You see him in the stores and you see him, on TV and different movies. He's this magical person. She wants to know because this person is so magical. He comes on Christmas Eve in the night while everyone is sleeping and comes through the chimney and gives gifts under, and you wake up and there's gifts under the tree. He fills the stockings that are up in the living room or on the fireplace, wherever. He fills those stockings up with treats. This fun person during this time of year. So how do you answer that question to a small child? I had to pause. On one side, I thought, should I just say yes, play into her imagination and magic? Yeah, Santa Claus is real. And she continues to enjoy that fantasy per se, or that thought. But then I felt like as a parent, I'm not being completely transparent and truthful to her about it. But then on the other side, should I tell her no? Santa Claus is not real? That also seems a little morbid almost, like during this time of year. Like there's something great about this person who's giving and caring for children and all those things. Do we want to say no? And then so I ended up with, he's based off of someone who is real. And so we're doing this online homeschooling. And there's an online academy, Orthodox academy called St. Athanasius Academy. And in kindergarten, they teach the letters, right? They teach the letters and basic start to do reading and all those things. And so what I like about this academy is while you learn the letters and things, there's an incorporation of faith all through the school. So for example, like one week is the letter A, and then it'll be, okay, well, A, we can talk. The teacher talks about something in the church related to the letter. So A is for angels, and she talked about angels that week. And B is for St. Barbara, and she talked about who St. Barbara was. And C is for candles, and why do we use candles, and all of that. And D is for deacon, and E is epistle. And this week was the letter N. And the letter N, she said N is for Nicholas, St. Nicholas. And she talked about St. Nicholas, which this past Monday, we celebrated the feast, or the church celebrates the feast of St. Nicholas, December 6th, every year. And St. Nicholas was born in the 3rd century. He lived in the 3rd and 4th century. And he grew up in a household that was very prayerful, always going to church, prayerful, reading scriptures. This is the life he grew up in, but his parents died while he was fairly young, but they were wealthy and left him with a rich inheritance, Nicholas. And he grew up to be chosen as a bishop of the church in a city called Myra, which is in present-day Turkey. And one of the things he would do with this wealth that he inherited was he would hear about different people who were poor and help them out. But it wasn't just that he gave it, but it was how he gave it. That's the unique thing about St. Nicholas. There were a lot of generous people, but the way St. Nicholas operated was he always tried to give in this secretive way. There was a story at that time of a man who had 3 daughters. And he wanted to get them married, but he couldn't afford to. And if he couldn't, then he would have to, they were so poor that he would, in shame, have to sell them to slavery. And so because of that, when Nicholas heard about that, when the Bishop Nicholas heard about that, he, in the middle of the night, threw a bag of gold through the window. When the father woke up, he saw this bag of gold was for his first daughter's wedding. And then the second night, he got another bag of gold for the second daughter's wedding. And the third night, the father was waiting by the window and saw St. Nicholas. And that's the only way. But otherwise, St. Nicholas was always trying to be secretive about his giving. And so his father was able to save his daughters from a life of slavery. In the same way, there were many poor people who there was a custom at the time, they would put their shoes outside at night, and in the morning there would be small little gold coins. And it was understood that St. Nicholas would go around during that time, giving his wealth, looking for people who needed it. That was where his mindset was. I talked about earlier this year about the 3 financial myths. It was one of my first faith studies that I did at here at the church. And the first myth I talked about in a sermon this year was, which I presented this some years ago. But the first myth I said, financial myth in our church, is that we have this mindset, or we had this mindset, that everybody should give the same exact amount. And we come up with some number, and this is the amount that everybody needs to give. And I said, that's completely false, right? We are called to give according to what we've been given. That's what God has always proclaimed, that based on what we've been given, if we've been given little, we're called to give according to that. If we've been given a lot, giving more is what we're called to do. And I talked about tithing, and I talked about how from the Old Testament on, you read about how 10% was always dedicated, and God commanded that 10% be given to the temple. And so that is a good place for us to start as Christians. But as much as we can give. But either way, it's not the same amount per person or per member. There are different amounts depending on what we have. And the second myth I talked about is that giving should be forced. And I talked about how God is very clear, and the scriptures are very clear, that only a cheerful giver is one who is blessed. A person who gives freely. We should always remember, if God wanted to, he can take anything from us. He's God. He gives us the chance to be free with it, to be charitable, to be generous. And the third gift, third myth, which I haven't talked about, which I want to remind us of, is that giving should be publicized and everybody should know what everyone is giving. This is the one I think the first two, we've as a church have made some progression. This is the one we're still struggling, I would say. But this is what St. Nicholas really tried to follow. And I'll read from you Jesus' teaching on this. And this is from St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6. He says, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret," meaning the Father in heaven, "who sees in secret, will himself reward you openly." And St. Nicholas is an example of how this happens. What motivated him to give the way he gave in this secretive way was precisely these words of Jesus. To not even let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. And I believe this is what St. Nicholas is reminding us of in this Christmas season and all throughout the year. And for me, it's a parish goal that one day, that we move towards this idea where instead of, names being published, we just have, if anything, just the amounts. I remember when I was in college, grades would be posted up on the wall. I still remember this. This was always a high anxiety time where the professor, after midterms or whatever, finals, they post a grade on the wall of the whole class. And you would see the whole grade. And everybody would be going, "Oh, grades are posted." And we would run to the place where the grades are posted. But obviously, they couldn't put the name of each person because that's private as to what everybody got. But they would have some sort of a number, and you knew your ID number, and that was based on the grade. But you could see what the highest was, what the lowest was, what the average was, all those types of things. I eventually want us to think of that. Like, okay, if you want to know what the general offerings are, you can have the numbers, but we shouldn't need to know who gave what. Because I think that doesn't follow the scripture. And that's something, I'm just planting that seed. But it is something that, people since the early time, because of St. Nicholas, always try, and his feast day was always near Christmas, people always tried to cultivate this habit of giving. And because St. Nicholas was such a lover of children, and the children also participated, and then that's where we got this idea of gift giving. So then the question is, what happened? How come we don't hear about St. Nicholas as much as we should? He sounds like a pretty awesome person, right, in the church. Somebody we should all love. And there's two reasons for that. The first reason is the Protestant movement in the 16th century, where they wanted to disassociate the life of the church with the saints. They didn't want to acknowledge St. Nicholas or any saints. And so when the Dutch came to this country, there were still people wanting to do gift giving and all of it. The children loved all of that. They still liked the whole idea of St. Nicholas. So how do you keep St. Nicholas and all the gift giving and all the things that he was about without the saint? And I think in Dutch it was Sinterklaas, because it's almost sounding like St. Nicholas, but it ended up evolving into Santa Claus. And that's actually how that continued on. And the second reason I was going to, that it kind of disassociated is as we've become a more secularized society. Now it's not even that we don't want St. Nicholas part of Christmas, we don't even want Christ part of Christmas, right? So as we're slowly taking away all of that, Santa Claus is more appealing. Because Santa Claus doesn't make you think exactly of the Lord. Whereas St. Nicholas, you think of the church, and you think of Christ, and you think of all of those things, right? But what I want us to kind of keep in mind is to kind of cultivate the spirit of St. Nicholas and of Christ in trying to look for opportunities to give, and to give secretly. You know, this past December 9th, I think Thursday, was our beloved Barnabas Tirmini's memorial. And he's someone, actually, when I think of St. Nicholas and giving secretly, he is an example of this as well. If you knew Barnabas Tirmini or ever saw him, he wasn't a person that was always the most pleasant or the most approachable. I would always be kind of, every time I got close to Tirmini, I kind of was a little bit of, and that's how maybe there was in the olden times, with a lot of the Tirminis. You wouldn't just go and be too friendly. You would kind of stay at a distance. And that was the case even with Barnabas Tirmini. Vargisachan is an exception of his generation. He's somebody who's so like everybody just comes around him. He has that. But a lot of times the bishops of olden times, it was different. And I'm sure the people who are older and my generation know what I'm talking about. But that being said, I still remember this, that in August, his birthday was in August. And, there weren't many seminarians. He came to America in 1993. There were no seminarians. And, maybe only in the 2000s, in the end of the 90s and the 2000s, we started to have people from here actually go to seminary. And so I was part of that, I guess, first few batches, first few people. And so in August, I remember at my home receiving a letter, and it was from the diocese, and it's from Barnabas to me. It's a handwritten letter, and he's basically, and with a gift, with a check in there from him, but he's writing in there saying, I want to give you all the seminarians this as in remembrance of my birthday, And I thought to myself, and he never mentioned it. Even if you were to go and talk to him about it or say thank you, he would just kind of smile and move on. Like he wouldn't expect to be acknowledged for it. He didn't expect anything about it. He didn't make any announcements about it. But I felt it was something very touching. Like he just secretly kind of did this, And it was just something that showed his heart. And there are many stories that I know of people who were in financial hard times when he would go to visit cities. And after he heard about it, he would later send money to them secretly. And not make an announcement. Nobody would know. But he would send something to help those who were in need. If he saw cases like that in America, he would help his diocese. And he was helping out the young clergy, because and the young seminarians at the time, just encouraging them. And it was on his birthday, a time where usually on our birthday we think everybody's giving me something or calling me, for birthdays. But here he is on his birthday thinking of others and giving towards others. And that's the spirit of St. Nicholas. And also the bishop who took over after him, coincidentally, his name is Nicolovas Tirumeni, named after Saint Nicholas. And so as we are getting ready in this Christmas season, I'm sure, as much as we say gift giving, really it is kind of trading gifts, right? We're all our family, we're kind of trading gifts and doing those things. But also to, more importantly, think about, not just in Christmas, but all the time, think about who can I give to that couldn't give to me back, right? That's the spirit of St. Nicholas, who couldn't give me anything back. Even in our children, we should be cultivating that. That's the thought of the giving of St. Nicholas. Who could I give to that couldn't give me anything back? And how can I do it as secretly as possible, that they don't even know that it's me? Because that's where God is glorified, right? God is glorified when we don't even know who gave us the blessing. Here it is, and so we just thank the Lord. It's the same thing in the church. When people are anonymously generous in the church, and we just see things happen, that's where the church, we start to glorify God. Right? Not praise any single person, but we're just thankful to the Lord that He's cultivated this generosity in our people. And so may the spirit of St. Nicholas be an example for us, and may all glory be to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and always, and forever and ever.